What's up? It's your boy Carcino here, and let's get into it. This is it, man. This is the truth behind the invisible hand of the NBA. David Falk. David Falk is not only Michael Jordan's agent, he's famous for being Michael Jordan's agent, but David Falk represented a lot of players in the game before Michael Jordan came into the league. He had James Worthy, he had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. As far as getting them certain contracts, shoe deals, and during those times, the NBA was in a different era. You know, it's not like how it was, of course, not today, but even back then, getting those kind of deals for players were not, it wasn't an everyday thing. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was like the first person to get a shoe deal, and it was basically a money deal. Back then, people who were getting like shoe contracts and as an individual player and stuff like that was mostly tennis players. That's why they was like, hey, get some tennis shoes. It was, mostly for tennis. So, tennis players, they would get the individual shoe deals because the game focused more on them individually. And the team would get the shoes. Like somebody would have a shoe contract with a team. But because of the NBA and the way it's structured, they have the NBPA, the National Basketball Players Association. And the players is its own separate union, So, but the thing is that they have active players, and those guys are representatives of the league or the team. I mean, the actual league. And not the team. Where the team falls under the list of the NBA with its deputy commissioners and the commissioner David Stern. But there's an invisible hand that ran the NBA behind closed doors. David B. Falk. And he had to arise to power. Now, when they did this deal with NBC with Michael Jordan, with Dick Ebersol with NBC, and Russ Granite was in there making these deals happen, before anything could even transpire, Russ Granite and David Stern hated David Falk because David Falk is the one that would always come up with these hard-nosed investigative, marketing ideas and turning over new rocks and news. Like, why aren't you guys thinking like this? You guys need to be doing this. He was trying to run the NBA instead of just looking out for his clients. But he claims it's all in the interest of his clients. So, while he's going through his negotiational periods, he went through a whole era of the changing of the guard. Because after he got his, deals from his company that he worked with, Dell, at ProServe Partners, their concern was tennis players. They didn't care for the NBA players. So a large part of them was dumped on David Falk. So when he got him, and in the 1984 draft, when he got Michael Jordan, now your team takes off. Michael Jordan negotiated the Nike deal, which changed basketball forever. Because Michael Jordan, for the first time in history, a player was able to get royalties off of his shoe. It wasn't a lot because he decided he wanted to take cash and he wanted royalty. So Adidas was willing to pay $500,000 for Michael Jordan. where Nike was only willing to pay $250,000, plus he had a percentage of the revenues. So they wanted Nike to go up to $500,000 to match the cash offer, which they eventually did, but they took a smaller percentage of the shoe, which was the greatest investment in Nike's history because it built the entire company. That one shoe, the very first Air Jordan, sold over $127 million worth of, almost $130 million in its first year. That shoe still sells to this day. The 1985 Air Jordan. So, with that being said, Michael Jordan's shoe launched Nike into a whole new realm of marketing in the urban community, that they even changed their name to Nike. Nike is not the pronunciation of that name. The name is Nike. That is the way you pronounce it. And if you had a pair back in those days, they were called Nikes, plural. I got my Nikes on. Nobody called it Nike until the hood started calling it Nike. We changed the way they pronounce the word Nike. And the invisible hand was all behind it. David Falk said, you know what? You don't change what people are calling it as long as they're buying it. If they say it's Nike, that's what it's going to be. So the pronunciation changed to Nike. Now, Russ Granite is getting ready to emerge the NBA into its own pattern. In 1988, Michael Jordan, who's in flourishing and becoming one of the biggest stars in the league, but yet his team isn't good enough to advance in the playoffs or really go too far. But they're seeing a changing of the guard. In 1988, Isaiah Thomas was handed down the role of being president of the NBPA. So, as president, Isaiah was the most qualified of anybody to be the president because he's intelligent. So, as president of this union, he's making sure the contracts are right for the players and the owners, making sure that neither side are intruding on the other, where they both can coexist and grow monetarily without it being conflict, to where one side is being greedy and trying to destroy the game. You see, and that's where Isaiah was so key, because he had the intelligence of a front office Ivy League college student. And he was the best basketball player that ever played a game. So he was the best of both worlds. So the players respected him because he wasn't a player that was just a role player who's now the president of basketball organization. He's an elite basketball player. And he's at the top of the pinnacle. So if he's at the top of the pinnacle and he's the president of the Basketball Players Association, I think what he's going to say is going to have a whole lot of weight with the other players. They all trusted what Isaiah Thomas said because he understood it. And he made them understand the language and the lingo, what the owners were trying to pass over to them. He actually lowered the rate of how much the players had to pay their agents from 15% to 10%. And this caused war. because now you cross the invisible hand, David Falk. And David Falk does not like anyone messing with him. Isaiah Thomas didn't have an agent. Isaiah Thomas was smart enough to represent himself. He had hired a sports agent if he needed one for certain situations, for marketing ideas. This is what kept Isaiah out of the big market and all the big advertisers and everything else, and why he had the Converse and all these other shoes, and he didn't have the type of marketing. He had Minute Maid and all these other smaller companies, because David Falk was going to make sure they got nothing. All those big giant companies like Coca-Cola, he was going to take all his agents and his clients too, which were all friends of Isaiah Thomas, like Patrick Ewing, Reggie Miller, Michael Jordan, Alonzo Mourning, Charles Barkley, all these guys that he had. And his power is growing. So he realized to control the NBA, or to get things to go in his favor, he needs to control the union. If you control the union, you can affect the NBA. But what David Falk wants to do is to attack it not as a player, but as an agent. An agent in charge of a basketball union is not a good thing, because they look at it as business. And they're here to screw the NBA and get what's best for them, and destroy the game if it needs to be destroyed just to get what they want, which is going to cause so many waves and make so many people unhappy that it's inevitable what's the end is going to be conflict, and the league is not going to stand for it. But that's exactly what he did. So getting with the other agents to try to fight this 10% agent rule, where they can only get 10% now instead of 15%. This is major millions of dollars being lost. And the NBA is very happy with this deal, because it kind of puts the agent in perspective of, you're just an agent. Stay with your job. And here comes the emergence of the Detroit Pistons, who are now the world champions of the NBA. So it's kind of hard to go after Isaiah Thomas the way they wanted to. But he did, by creating this gambling scandal with the press, using his power to try to make Isaiah look shady in the process. But what helped him is when they walked off the basketball court against the Chicago Bulls. Now Russ Granite and all these other basketball officials are now against Isaiah Thomas. David Stern and Isaiah Thomas got along pretty much very well. They didn't have a problem. Russ Granite didn't really like Isaiah Thomas because, one, he's the head of the players union, and he's got to do the negotiations with the television deals, with the unions. He's the deputy commissioner, so that is his job. So of course they're going to butt heads. But David Falk was the invisible guy in between all of them, causing the rifts. But in this case, he got landed a golden chip, because once the NBA was on NBC, everything was to favor Falk's players, all these highlights. It was like theater entertainment. It became the basketball players were just the stars, and the teams were the co-stars. It's one player from each team is the main star, and he gets all the close-ups. He's get everything, and everybody else is a supporting cast. And Dick Armstrong, who ran all these miniseries on NBC, and they were known for him, and he won Emmys for him when he came over. And as soon as he came over to NBC, he wanted to bring the NBA over to NBC. That was his job, to bring it over from CBS. And what they did more than what CBS did. CBS is more sports oriented station. That's why they're good with college basketball. They're good with high school basketball. Any type of sport, CBS is best because they care about the actual game. NBC could care less about a game. They care about theater and maximizing the opportunity of making it epic. For CBS, they just reported what was going on the court. They were very informative. They were going to give you the details. They were going to tell you the game. People actually knew about the game. NBC didn't have to know about the game. All you got to do is know about the player. They had cameras that went into their everyday lives to show you them playing with dogs, show you them cooking. They're going to tell you how much they love their mom and on the Mother's Day game. They're going to tell you all these features that happen. But one thing was for sure, the Chicago Bulls had to be a feature where they feature a game with Michael Jordan on NBC every weekend. The Bulls cannot have a weekend where they did not play on NBC. That was the deal. And they hadn't even won anything yet. It's because he said Michael Jordan is the star of the NBA, everybody else are co-stars. And everybody's going against Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. Then they'll take one player off another team, Charles Barkley and the Sixers. Isaiah Thomas and the Detroit Pistons. It was based on those theories only, to where they picked one player off and everybody followed suit. This became the ideal of every team. Where this used to just be the norm for one, it became the theme for all teams. Because they didn't used to make jerseys for everybody. You had to be good or an all-star. Maybe an all-star a couple of years before the NBA would even make a jersey for you to be sold. You had to earn that right. Now, you can get that jersey anytime you feel like it. That's how the league had changed. So when this incident happened, when the Bulls beat the Pistons and Isaiah then walked off the court, now we got him. This is David Falk's chance to turn the keys of the union. Because now he can get them. Because now the NBA's mad at Isaiah. And Russ Granite had just negotiated this deal to bring the NBA players to the Olympics. And Dave Falk, who's the agent of like Michael Jordan, and he's involved in this now. So now he needs Falk. So Falk's like, well, you need me. I got all the key players. So now we got to sit at this table and figure out what's best for my players. And once this happened, it became a tug of war with David Falk, who was threatening because I believe either Reebok or Adidas was in charge of the NBA, the whole USA Olympics, and not Nike. And Nike was his client. The company Nike, Michael Jordan, Patrick Ewing, David Robinson, you had Karl Malone, you had all these players, Charles Barkley, under his umbrella. And so what had happened was they couldn't use the word Olympics or whatever, so they could only use the rings or something. And they were just going to have, he was like, well, we'll just take our players, we'll put the rings on them, we're going to make our own photo, we'll make our own team. It was ridiculous, the fight that was happening with the Dream Team. It being split in half because the fight between Nike and Adidas, of who was going to go to the events, what they were going to do, and it's like, no, Michael Jordan and our players won't be attending that meeting because it's a Adidas meeting. They got their logo everywhere. We're not going to have Nike players promoting that. So it was a hassle. But it had to have Michael Jordan. The Dream Team would have to have Michael Jordan on it. You know, so they had to concede and come up with a way to make it work. But the dark hand of David Falk is greed. He keeps pushing for more. It's never enough. So after this is done, Dream Team's over, he starts digging the knife right in the back of the NBA. And he's got the union. Now he's got the players challenging Isaiah Thomas on certain issues. And Isaiah Thomas had already told them and said, look, David Falk is trying to run the entire commission. And he told the NBA this before. They didn't listen. They didn't listen. And he warned them, completely warned them. They did not listen. He thought like, well, you're just being paranoid. And he says, no, he's been trying to take over the union for years. His controlling influence on the union and the negotiations should be a violation of him being an agent. This is the players' union. So Buck Williams was next in line in the committee, and he had very good business IQ, right, with Isaiah Thomas. And what was brewing was the fact that Isaiah Thomas was keeping David Falk from destroying the Players Association. You got Michael Jordan in there, and he don't like Isaiah anyway, so now you got Patrick Ewing, who's a friend of Isaiah, you know, and now he's like, look, Falk making me this much money. We're getting multi-millions of dollars just from endorsements, so I'm going to stick with Falk on this one, and he's right, so we're going to roll with him. And it's causing like a messy divorce. And Isaiah Thomas retired in 1994. And when he retired, Michael Jordan was out of the NBA as well. So when he left, he turned everything over to Buck Williams and said, Buck, you are now the players, you're president of the Players Association, and that was it. Buck Williams come in there and starts running things, and players don't really respect Buck. Some do, but some don't. They're like, okay, we know Buck, but Buck never won nothing. Buck was a good player, but now the union is in dire need here. They're in a bad position. And for all you people who talk about the NBA, they suspended Michael Jordan secretly and he couldn't come back. That was so crazy. You just don't know how much money the NBA was losing without Michael Jordan. You just don't know. Now, here's one of the reasons why they wouldn't mind back then. The NBA Lockout in 1995. As Isaiah predicted, this was going to happen to the league. But when he was president, this wasn't going to happen because he was controlling the agents and keeping them out. But now, when you got players like Michael Jordan, Alonzo Mourning, Reggie Miller, Charles Barkley, and Patrick Ewing, all in here with other agents on his side, they began to advocate a decertification of the union to try to strip the NBA management of his antitrust protection, making the salary cap and the collective bargaining violations of antitrust laws and all that. They wanted all that to be done so they could reform the players' union. David Stern got involved because he was sick of Falk. So he was like, look, you are trashing your other clients. You're looking at the ones that's on the committee, but all the other players that is not in the committee or on the union, you're just screwing them and worrying about the Michael Jordans, the Charles Barkley, but what about your other clients? You're screwing them over. Which was true. David Falk don't care. He wants to take. So he's making them say, look, we got the numbers. We are going to fight. You guys get into the head of the other players and we're going to hold up the NBA season. We're going to strike if we need to. So this whole thing caused a big rift in the NBA between the players and ownership. Ownership was sick of the agents and the players who they felt was becoming more spoiled. The money was going up. They were getting everything they wanted now. You know, they lost the decertification, but Falk won because he got the removal of the luxury tax on salaries. So now you get deals like you can get $33 million in a season. You know, the pay revenue was up and the salary structure was different. And all this stuff David Falk won was later going to be a problem down the road because they haven't really resolved anything. They just did what they could to keep the season safe. But this was a major problem because other sides is losing money left and right because not every team can afford to do this because of their market. And this is when you have teams that got to shut down and other teams got to move from one city to another. But they don't care. David Falk doesn't care. He doesn't care about the league. He doesn't care about the nature of the game. He's not trying to... He's greed. Greed can never be satisfied. It's always going to want more. So the invisible hand who was controlling all this wasn't that invisible at all. Everybody knew it was David Falk. All these players who never had an opinion on anything in life, all of a sudden now are very vocal about what's going on in the union. So it wasn't very hard to figure out that it's David Falk. So, again, the big holdout, the one in 99 where they played like half a season. Who remember that NBA season where the Spurs won the championship from playing half a season? And the league went into a major fight over the same issues before, and David Falk had basically got in there and just said, you know what, 29 days before they were getting ready to say, if we don't get it fixed by this date, we got to cancel the entire season. And Patrick Ewing at this time had became president of the organization, so they just let that go. And it was terrible at that point because here it is, you got Michael Jordan leaving the league. You got Allen Iverson, who was one of Falk's major players that he represented at the time. And he would leverage teams. He'll make teams and players do trades and make teams do trades by leaning in and saying, look, I'll move my player to another team if you do this. He was manipulative like that. If you don't release my player or trade him, I don't care what his contract says. If you don't trade my player, because he doesn't want to play there anymore. If you don't trade him, I'll go ahead and take my other player and move him on another team just so they can destroy y'all and make a big team and come in and destroy y'all. But if y'all don't, then I won't do it. David Falk was maneuvering players to teams using this strategy. He wanted and had massive leverage after the strikes. His client list was huge, and once Michael Jordan retired, he had Allen Iverson, and when he had Allen Iverson, he was the reason the Allen Iverson crossover over Michael Jordan and the shot became so spectacular, just from one move to like the move. People forget the Sixers got blown out that game, and that shot really didn't mean anything. It was just 2 points that he scored on Michael Jordan, who came down on the very next play and got a 3-point play himself. So Allen Iverson was his rep, but it ended up changing the entire structure of the league. He started to manipulate players going to other teams. He the one got Charles Barkley to Phoenix. The NBA had no choice. The 76ers had no choice but to listen to David Falk. Then when Barkley didn't want to play there and wanted to go to Houston, he got Phoenix to trade him to Houston. David Falk was an amazing, powerful human being at this point, and also known as the Invisible Hand. Now, some say he's retired, some says he's back in the game. He's representing a few players now, not like he used to. Once Michael Jordan left, he kind of, after Allen Iverson, he kind of just limited his rosters down and just started working behind the scenes doing other things. But David Falk he negotiated the first $100 million deal in basketball for Alonzo Mourning, which ultimately led to Shaq leaving Orlando. So if you see deals get done or not get done, you see why or how they're made, and you see things that don't make sense, there's powerful influences behind it. Like, you never got a reason as to why the Chris Paul deal didn't work with the Lakers. Why didn't, and why was it a big deal that Chris Paul would go to LA? Why did the NBA block that? That was a right the league fought for, is that they can veto a deal if they wanted to. Players' agents were doing the manipulative roles of trying to build teams. And my thing is, you're letting LeBron James do it. LeBron James is moving players here and there, saying, I want this guy, I want this guy, I want that guy, put him on my team. So what stopped you from doing that for the Lakers? I'm out.